Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Airspeed's Korra Rewatch video. This one is going to be for K105, The Spirit of Competition, Episode 5 of Book 1 Air. And this is obviously a fairly controversial episode in regards to the fact that I think by a lot of the fandom it's kind of treated as one of the weaker episodes, especially in Book 1, because it's a very romance drama focused episode, and that ended up being a very kind of heavily disliked aspect of the book. I don't mind it too much. I actually think it's a pretty well written episode for what it is, but I definitely understand the idea that here's an episode that focuses on pro bending and the relationship stuff, and how, like, for some people they don't really like pro bending, so that aspect of this episode doesn't mean a lot to some people. And then the romance drama is, I think, universally the least liked aspect of The Legend of Korra. So from that perspective, I get why so many people don't like this one. But I give it credit because there's some good character development that comes out of this. And it to me is done differently than some of the other more drama-focused sections of the season. I think in general, Book 1 deals with it fairly okay. It just goes off the rails in Book 2, the romance drama stuff, because here you see that there's a much bigger willingness for the characters to, I think, talk to each other, even if they're at odds with each other. There's a willingness for them to, like, by the end of it, really kind of come together, talk about it, and just be like, you know, we'll have to deal with this at some point, but let's focus on the tournament for now, which is more or less the resolution here, that we set up all this drama, and it's like, for now, like, we're going to focus on trying to win this tournament. Afterwards, we'll fix up all this relationship drama stuff that's just come into play. You see, you know, Mako and Bolin come to odds with each other, but they have a very nice kind of makeup scene. It's a very fitting one between, like, brothers, that not many words are needed. They just kind of know that, like, we'll get through this. It'll be okay. Girls, yeah. And that's kind of all that was needed. And then equally, you know, at the start you get, I suppose, the different sides of, like, Korra talking to, like, Jinora, Iki, and then Pema about relationship stuff, whereas the brothers talk to each other about it. And in the end you kind of have to say that, like, who causes most of this drama focus? You really have to say it's kind of Pema in the end. Like, the advice that Pema gives to Korra is what kind of prompts a lot of this stuff to happen. And especially, I suppose, knowing the incident later on that we find out about between Lin, Tenzin, and Pema, it's kind of like, yeah, that probably wasn't the best piece of advice to give to someone. So Pema kind of inadvertently ends up causing some of this incident stuff that happens, which is kind of funny to look at. You know, that smile ends up sort of being this kind of mischievous smile of, like, I'm going to cause a romance drama here. And I think what's very interesting, I think what's well written about this episode is how they blend the pro-bending side of the episode together with the kind of a character dynamic side, in that what's happening out of the ring directly affects what's going on inside the ring. So when Bolin thinks he has a really good date with Korra, he's on fire in the next match. When they're all working together as a team, they just blow through their opponents. When they all are sort of at odds with each other because of the incidents from before of, like, Mako and Korra have that kiss, Bolin sees it, it just creates a rift between all members of the team, and suddenly none of them are working well together, and it's left to Korra to really kind of stand up and bring the team into the finals. So I do like it on that side of things. I think they could have got more character development out of this if they had, I think, focused a little less on making it very drama focused and a little bit more, like, character focused, in that I like the kind of Korra Bolin scene. That date is actually very well done, because you actually see how similar they are and how well they get on. But the setup there is kind of meant to be that Bolin very much sees this as a date, and while I think Korra sort of roughly realizes it's a date, she isn't, like, focusing on it as much as Bolin is. So it's sort of a little bit like he's being led on, and when she only really cares about Mako. So it's one of those ones where I feel it's written well enough where you can understand each character's perspective in that you don't really feel like, oh, Mako's the villain in all of this. He's the one making all the mistakes. You don't really feel like Korra's doing it, and you don't really feel that Bolin's doing it. All these just little factors came together to cause these incidents of, Korra going through with the advice, maybe timing it wrongly. Mako obviously kind of struggling to deal with the fact that he's in a relationship but also cares about Korra and how he's meant to in any way deal with that. And I think for the most part he tries to deal with it okay by just being like, look, I'm in a relationship with Asami right now. I have to commit to that, even if it means potentially hurting Korra. And from that perspective, you're just kind of like, yeah, Korra, maybe not the best move to just kind of immediately kind of rush in like that and kind of force this kind of awkwardness out of Mako. But you get why she did it after hearing the advice from Pema. And then you do feel sorry for Bolin, but also you also feel like maybe he should have seen the fact that Korra was initially kind of avoiding going on a date with him, but then accepted after talking to Mako. So something must have happened, and he couldn't really see that. So he maybe got himself like overly invested in a potential relationship with Korra, and that ended up coming across quite badly later on for him. And the kiss scene that we get, Mako and Korra, is interesting because obviously I think it's meant to reference the Ember Island Players thing of like, here's an avatar kissing someone just after that character has said they're confused, and causing a bit of a incident temporarily. So that's a nice reference, but it ends up just kind of causing a bit of drama. As I said, thankfully they move past it quite quickly. In that we don't really deal with the romance drama for a couple more episodes. Like, we touch on it a little bit in 8, I believe, and then I think primarily it's then getting towards the finale when it properly kind of comes up and the kind of breakup type stuff has to happen and characters make their final decisions, I suppose. But thankfully I think most of the like relationship kind of shipping drama is in this episode, and there's only a little bit in the other episodes. So on that front, it kind of works out okay, in that we're not just endlessly like having every episode have a huge focus on just characters being at odds with each other. I think Asami probably should have been in the episode a little more. The best we really get is Korra in an effort to, I suppose, get through the romance drama, just talking to Asami, thanking her and her father for their support, and just, I suppose, trying to make an effort with between the two of them. But it's so interesting that like they've said like 2 words to each other so far, and we're like 5 episodes in, and I suppose getting into the probe ending stuff as well, we obviously see the first couple of rounds of the tournament right up until they set up the final, which is going to be the wolf bats against the fire ferrets. And again, I think the dynamics work, as you see initially the fire ferrets working perfectly together. You see teamwork between all members of the team as they defeat the Rabaroos. Then in the next match, Korra and Mako have their kind of incidents, so they're at odds with each other, and Bolin has to really kind of, in a way, lead the team to victory there. Really cool that we get to see the rules about like if it ends in a tie, it becomes a one-on-one match on a small arena. That was really cool to see, and we see it a little bit later on in the next episode. But just I like that we got to see more of the rules kind of through this match. We get to see that you get basically yellow cards in this match. I assume you can get red cards as well if you break the rules kind of continuously, and just getting to see the different teams as they give you a tiny bit of information on them, like, okay, the Rabaroos are an all-female team. Here's the previous kind of longest reigning champions. Here's a team that's very equal to the Fire Ferrets. Of course, since then we've got the names for most of these characters. I think all of them actually, but nothing overly in depth that I think I'd prefer if we knew a bit more about them. Just where exactly are they from? How did the team come together? Just little bits and pieces like that I'd like to get. I get why it wasn't a focus in the season, why they didn't really feel the need to develop the teams all that much. But just it's something where I feel they could go into if they needed to in any sort of like reference book if they ever release something like that. Yeah, other than that, it's it was just fun to see these two kind of a sporting kind of an episode that's very focused on pro bending incorporate the kind of characters out of the ring kind of issues into what's going on and have it just be this huge impact. And I suppose the scenes in the kind of final match, as they're in the semi-finals, I suppose, Mako and Bolin get eliminated before the match. They've more or less given up because the team isn't working together. They're ready to just be like, it's over for this year. We'll try again next year. But I like that it's Korra who's the one who's kind of like, you know, we need to do this. We won't be happy with ourselves if we don't do this. We have to put this aside temporarily and do this. And she, in a way, kind of saves the brother's dream by performing that hat trick, which speaks to obviously since she's left the task force, she has been training in pro bending a lot. She's been developing those skills, which we know are going to help her outside of the ring as well. And for her to really nicely, I think, tactically set up that knockout in the end, it worked very well. Because you can see what she does. She doesn't focus really on pushing them back. She just basically pushes one of them back into the third zone, one of them back into the second zone, and then just focuses her attacks on lining them up in a row. And then she delivers a really, really powerful attack that just KOs everyone. And it's a expert level knockout. So it's a thing that kind of brings the team back on board as they, I suppose, realize now that the brothers don't just have to rely on each other, that they're like the two best team-working pro bending members, but they also have Korra here who can do that as well, which is something they've never had before. So it kind of is this sense of like the firefighters can actually go somewhere now that the three members of the team are very, very equal. And it just, I like that they end the episode with, bringing everyone back to a point where, like, look, there's still some unaddressed issues here, but we are going to prioritize trying to win the tournament over any of this romance stuff. I suppose some of the stuff that they maybe need to bring up is like, is Mako going to tell Asami about what happened? And I suppose this is where it maybe gets into a little bit of the blame game. Who is really to blame for a lot of this? Korra obviously is the one who makes the kind of key moves that end up causing a lot of the drama. Obviously, to some degree, prompted by Pema. But, she's the one who kisses Mako. And while they roughly kind of go to say, like, oh, Mako kissed back, it's kind of like, she initiated the kiss. So, like, Mako can't really be to blame. And should he just directly go over and say to Asami, yeah, Korra just kissed me, what's up? So, like, is the decision for him to kind of keep it a secret until later on and Asami finds out right or wrong? That's, I think, up for debate. And that, like, I don't think you can criticize Mako too much for doing that. Because I think throughout the episode, he made it fairly clear that he's focusing on Asami for now, but he was trying to be as honest as he could with Korra, of saying, like, I'm not just going to ignore you and just lie to you. I do actually care about you. It's just I'm in this relationship with Asami and I can't just pursue two at the same time or something like that. That I feel like there's actually a certain level of kind of nuance and somewhat okay writing with what they do here. It's just, it kind of ends up being this thing where Mako just gets this becomes the focus of Mako as a character. It becomes one of the only things people tend to remember about Mako as a character. Is just like, oh, he's the one who makes all the mistakes in the romance, because retroactively, like through like remembrances and stuff like that, they ended up like basically trying to tell the audience through interpretation that, like, yeah, Mako's the one at fault for nearly all of this, whereas, like, of course he makes some mistakes, but the others do as well. Yet, like, Bolin's allowed to just go away scot-free. Korra especially is kind of let off the hook for a lot of this stuff, even though she kind of ends up causing most of the incidents. So it's a bit of a weird one. And definitely the fandom was a sort of somewhat frustrating when it came to this plot point to kind of really talk to about this sort of stuff. But anything else to talk about in the episode? It's a very, very focused episode on just like two specific things. We don't really get to see much of the villains. We don't get to see a lot of the other characters going on. I suppose Shiro Shinobi, I don't think I've talked about him all that much. I think he really makes pro bending. Just that really energetic commentary with the kind of one-liners about what's going on. I love the line where he says, like, Bolin basically gets sick over the side of the arena, and then he immediately is just like, oh, he's thrown up his noodles. And that reminds me, this broadcast is sponsored by Flamio Instant Noodles and the newliest noodles in Republic City, United Republic. There's some nice jokes with him, and especially with what they do with him in the next episode. His voice is just so memorable, I think, from the series, and he really makes the sport what it is because of the really good commentary. And then, as for the action of what actually happens here, well, I agree that pro bending isn't as exciting as a just straight up bending match that isn't limited by pro bending rules. I think there's definitely some nice animation moments as we go through these kind of pro bending matches of just kind of seeing the acrobatics and how they kind of flow acrobatics into these kind of quick pro bending attacks, like especially Bolin when he's on fire in like the second match. The way he kind of does these kind of jump ups and kind of like flying kicks to like send multiple earth discs flying at people is very well done. And then some of the animation on like Bolin comes in, attacks, he ducks, and Mako's does this kick basically right over Bolin's back. And when they have that choreography working really well, you can tell that a lot of detail went into it, but at the same time, you do get some of the kind of, I suppose, less interesting animation shots where they kind of accelerate through the fight by just kind of close up on a character getting hit by an earth disc with no background and kind of falling to the ground. So I'd love to know about the animation of just like, did some of those kind of more detailed scenes mean that they had to kind of take a shortcut with some of the other scenes? So it's definitely, I don't think it's the most interesting episode, but I will always say that I do think it's a well-written one. I don't think there's like anything like hugely to complain about. Of course, the direction of like why they go in this direction, I suppose, is something you can bring up. I think they probably made a mistake by not incorporating Asami enough into what's going on here, and then only later on kind of really kind of making her any sort of a focus. But it's always an episode I kind of appreciate. I think it's needed because pro bending is an important plot point in the book, especially with what happens at the finals in the next episode. So very excited to do next week's the next episode, and the winner is, and that will be later on this week. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this specific episode. How do you think this really is one of the worst episodes, or do you agree with me that it's somewhat well written, even though it's maybe not the most ideal episode for the season? But yeah, let me know your comments below about this one. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.